After retiring from the Air Force, he became an author and speaker, sharing insights from his years working at the intersection of medicine, aviation, and spaceflight. He recently gained attention for publicly discussing a 1992 experience involving what he describes as a disc-shaped craft seen at a secure facility.
I think one thing that sometimes people miss is that I was concerned with what NASA was doing, because when I got there in 1989, there were a lot of crazy things going on. The only problem was they were red Kimm lights. And so as soon as I learned this, I said, you got to be kidding me. Why did you put red Kimm lights in? And the NASA guys said, well, we don't want to ruin their night vision. I could see a green Kimm light in the water 10 miles away on a clear night. We've got to change to green Kimm lights. And it took me a year and a half to convince them to switch to green Kimm lights, so that if they actually held one up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, we could find the astronaut to save their life. There are just places on this earth that have magnetic disturbances, and if you disturb magnets, you're going to disturb electromagnetic fields, and you're going to cause electrical equipment to malfunction. The world is much stranger than people think. We reached the location at the specific radial that had been indicated. We'd actually gotten there like 8 minutes faster than we should have, and we did not have a tailwind, so that shouldn't have accounted for it.
And what would you put that down to?
Since we were all experienced personnel, everyone on the flight crew is experienced. And so the reason we're looking at each other is because we know we should not have been able to do this. And yet it doesn't matter whether we should have. The fact of the matter is we did it. One of the guys said, is anybody going to mention it? And we all looked at each other, and finally the aircraft commander said, no, we're going into the briefing. And so nothing was said. No one wanted to talk about what we had seen. It is not advantageous to your career to say that you experienced something that anomalous. I was really hooked on that. And so it affected my outlook for the rest of my life. And that was even before I experienced anything that would cause me to say, this is the same kind of stuff that's in Eric von Daniken's book.
But he certainly can still speak about the UFO topic, and he's a very interesting gentleman with an incredible legacy.
If nitrogen tetroxide leaks, it forms a big red cloud. If you see a big red cloud, run. If you even breathe, it might be the last thing you do. I've got something to show you that even you have never seen. As soon as we entered the office, he shut the door and locked it. There was no time or date or location noted on it. There was no evidence of any classification marker or anything else. It was just this raw feed from the closed circuit television, and it looked like it was sort of a typical military hangar. So when I looked at it, it looked like just a regular hangar, with the exception of what was inside the hangar. Then what I saw was a saucer vehicle. It looked like an egg. Eggs are a little bit oblong. If you sort of smashed it down to where it was even all the way around, that was what it looked like. Now, the reason these impressed me as being in a research vehicle was that the surface was so smooth and clear that if you had not put something on it, you couldn't tell what was going on. So as I'm looking at this thing, I commented to him, who on earth would make something like that? And he said, well, I can't tell you that. And I said, why would we design something like this? And here's exactly what he did. He said, we got it from them. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. You're going to defeat everybody. Nobody has the capability of doing that. Well, this thing activated and it lifted off the surface about 3 feet. There were electromagnetic discharges going on around the surface of the craft. It was just sitting there like this. And then all of a sudden, I forgot to mention one very important thing. The reason I called the one section the 12 o'clock position, or the forward section, was because as it rotated, I could see U.S. Air Force
Hmm.
written. I'm looking at a stinking flying saucer. And now as it rotates, I see that it says U.S. Air Force and has an Air Force flight insignia. We have no craft anywhere that can assume a 45-degree angle of attack and remain motionless. I had already encountered astronauts and pilots and other flight crews who had witnessed UAPs before in space and in flight within normal aircraft capabilities. And as they would tell the stuff, they would then turn around and say, but I'm not telling anyone about it. I'm not going to tell somebody I just saw a flying saucer. That might be a good way to end my career right there. 3 days later, there's an article in Newsweek magazine about me and my story. The New York Post is running it. It's in newspapers and other news sources all over the world within days. Oh, it was perfect. At Cape Canaveral and Patrick Air Force Base, we had CCTV on lots and lots of stuff. So I was very much used to watching the closed circuit television in all kinds of different areas. And it was extremely clear. There was nothing at all that made me suspicious that anything I was seeing was not exactly what it appeared to be. At that time, I don't think Steven Spielberg could have made a closed circuit TV Photoshop or anything of that sort. From the position of the camera to where vehicle was, couldn't have been more than 25. So I was seeing an absolutely perfect view of it. I helped launch space shuttles. I flew F 16s, T 38s, all kinds of helicopters, but it was just like a bucket of cold water was poured on me when I looked, and that's a saucer. It
Yeah.
wasn't flying at the time, so it wasn't a flying saucer yet, but just in a few moments, it lifted off and began to maneuver. And because as I told these stories, so many people were interested, I have written a book, and it's about all these different kind of things, but also some of my military experiences unrelated to UAPs. But I didn't get fancy on the name. I just thought there's no better name for it than we got it from them. But if the contract had been outlined by the United States Air Force, whatever corporation is coming up with the design, they're going to put U.S. Air Force logo on it. That's who's paying the bills. Someone paid for the research and development of this thing because it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. If I could go back to that situation, I would not have walked into that room. If I went back and I stepped through those double doors with all of the knowledge I have now, and he says, I'm going to show you something you have never seen, and I understood what that was, I would say, no thanks. I'm going to get in my car and I'm getting out of here. I was very vulnerable because of what he did. Now, then, since I started talking about this, I have been very vulnerable also. And a number of things have happened that have been persecution. It is very intimidating to have calls to your cell phone scrambled and sent to false locations. And that has happened to me. The only way I can defend myself is to tell this story so that if somebody does something to me, they're going to know, hold it, I told the whole world I was being harassed.
He said on the screen, someone nudged him and said, Ross, look at that. And on the screen, 8 egg shaped objects appeared from behind the space station that the feed was looking at.
Domestic enemies can be against the American people when they are trying to hide something that they just don't want the people to know. And so my oath was not to a president, it was to the Constitution of the United States. I don't want anything to do with the building where somebody, without telling me, showed me a stinking flying saucer that I would have to cope with for the rest of my career and the rest of my life. The non human intelligences have the capabilities that they could reveal themselves openly in any fashion they wanted, and there would not be a thing the government could do about it. If you walked into Walmart and there was a non human intelligence standing there, you could interface with it. These beings, whatever they are, could have the ability to disclose themselves, and there's not a thing the US government could do about it. People who have seen a UFO could have PTSD from getting out of their car and seeing a UFO right above you, especially with abductions and other kinds of things. The government keeps trying to say, don't believe your lying eyes. There's nothing to see here. But there is. It's just very frustrating to me because most people really know, yeah, they're real. They are real.